I've got to be honest, I think I lost my smile a lot after the Euros when it came to playing for England because of, I don't know, I felt like I was a little bit mistreated in comparison to what I contributed. I felt like some of it was a bit harsh on me. I think I felt a bit like the scapegoat. Maybe I was feeling a little bit sorry for myself. I contributed some pretty big moments, and in the end it felt like the kind of whole world was kind of crumbling down on me after the Euro, especially after the 3 days following the final. And
right, Rory, where do you stand on this? Because the office does seem split on whether or not Bellingham was in fact scapegoated. I feel quite strongly about this, but what do you think?
I feel like Jude Bellingham was actually seen in the opposite light. I think that he was given an incredibly positive coverage over the Euros. I saw him as being our saviour. He saw himself as being our saviour. Let's remember that. He positioned himself upon that pedestal.
How did he position himself?
Well, he scored a goal and he asked who else was going to do it if not him.
Okay.
That's an incredibly arrogant, but justifiably arrogant. He scored an amazing goal. I was in the stadium when he did it. I went potty and he asked who else. When you do things like that, you're suggesting that no one else is going to do it for England. You are telling the world that you are the person that's going to do it for England. So when things don't happen in the way that we dreamed they would, it's natural that Jude Bellingham is going to be part of that focus. He went to Real Madrid. He won the double in his first year. He was unplayable at times. He's one of the best players in the camp. He scored that unbelievable goal in Gelsenkirchen. The hopes of the nation were on him, and when we didn't ultimately win, I think that they were hugely applauded. I was at the game in Dortmund, and I guarantee. Did you go to any of the games out there, Max?
No,
I guarantee you that I've been in a lot of stadiums over the years, a lot of stadiums following England, and a lot of the time it's been brutal. It's been toxic. It's been aggressive. It's been hostile to the players. I swear to you, this tournament was completely different. It was none of that. It was unilateral, partisan, aggressive support for England. You know when we put in that pitiful performance?
There's a difference, Rory, between the support you get in a stadium, and you know this, than the headlines that you get. The thing that I pick up on is the intrusion on his family, the intrusion on his nan.
Of course.
And so when he is criticised during the Euros by the papers, not by fans in the stadium, not by you or I, but by the papers, and he's criticised for not coming out and speaking to the media, I think fair play. He doesn't want to dance to their tune. You've got, and let's be honest, the media, and this is one of my gripes as someone that works in the media, is not one homogenous blob that are all after the same line. It's not that. And I think it's important to delineate those things. But there are dark corners of the print industry that will pester and intrude. And so if he comes out and says, I felt harmed by that, or not harmed, but I felt offended by that. I don't like that intrusion, so I didn't want to come out into the media. I think fair play.
No, I agree. I don't think that anybody has a God-given right to speak to anyone else. I don't think that Jude Bellingham has to speak to the media, and if he feels that there has been some intrusion on his life, on his personal space, then absolutely. He doesn't have to talk. The only reason that he may have to is because, not have to, but why it could be within his interests, and certainly the interests of the doting and idolising fans who love him and who have followed him around the world. I think that it could be the fans who were in Gelsenkirchen would love to hear from Jude Bellingham at some point over the month-long tournament.
Yeah, I understand that. And I don't think that fans shouldn't want to hear from their heroes or want to hear from players like Jude Bellingham who come up with these iconic moments. But what I don't like, I don't necessarily think, having spoken to people in the office, I don't necessarily think that he was scapegoated. I think lots of players like Harry Kane, even the manager, Gareth Southgate, were, blamed for certain performances. But what I do think he's right in saying that he did receive some unfair treatment. For me, right, and this is where I come at it, we all make our own judgments on players based on our own sort of moral lens, right? My character assessment of Jude Bellingham is that he's polite, he's articulate, he's well brought up, but at the same time, he's got swagger. He is rightly, supremely confident in his own ability, but he also maintains a really important sense of humility. That's my assessment of him. So when he comes out and says, essentially, I feel that I was mistreated, I believe him. I'm willing to believe him.
Yeah,
I think that the media in this country, Roy, and this is the last thing I'll say in it, and you can respond, should be lauding somebody like Jude Bellingham,
but I think
not
we did.
Seeking. I disagree.
But I think we did at the end of the
you
Euros.
Were in Gelsenkirchen, were you reading the back pages?
At the end of the Euros, when we explored where it went wrong and why we didn't win that tournament, I think the players that came out of that tournament with positive coverage was Bukayo Saka, Jude Bellingham, John Stones, maybe the keeper, they did all right. The players that were held responsible for England's failings, most notably Phil Foden, Harry Kane, and rightly so, by the way. When I say they were held responsible for me, by me.
Yeah.
Like, I've always pledged loyalty and love to Harry Kane, but he absolutely let his country down at that tournament. I've always said that Phil Foden was the best player in the league last year, undoubtedly Premier League Player of the Year.
But he was disappointing in the Euros.
No, he let us down at the Euro. Like, I will be very harsh about that, but never did I suggest that Jude Bellingham did.
You didn't suggest. You might not have suggested, but some of the coverage that Jude Bellingham got, he looks leggy, he doesn't look bothered, he doesn't want to speak to the media, he's not getting on with teammates in England camp. That, for me, is all unnecessary criticism. And you talk about one of the reasons why England don't succeed, and I think it's because there is, in part, a media climate that looks to belittle, looks to get a couple of headlines that might get a journalist a payday, rather than focus on, for example, how this 21, he's 21, isn't he, Jude Bellingham, this 21-year-old is set to be an absolutely vital cog in the next generation of English talent. Why don't we sort of lean into that rather than sort of, I think, blame someone like Jude Bellingham? You might not have blamed him, but I certainly saw lots of stuff criticised.
I think about, in the opening game he scored the winner. He scored that amazing goal in Gelsenkirchen to keep us in the tournament. In the last kick of the game, a bicycle kick in the most glorious of circumstances. I just don't see. There were scapegoats. Phil Foden, undoubtedly, maybe it was not even a scapegoat because the word scapegoat implies that it wasn't his fault, whereas I believe it actually was. The lack of performance from Phil Foden is part of the reason we went out. The real reason we went out was the manager getting it completely wrong. Kieran Trippier being inept on the left back. Kieran Trippier being selected at left. Like, there were a million reasons why England didn't get it right. And if we're going to talk about where it went wrong, Gareth Southgate, head and shoulders above everyone else, he's the reason we didn't win it. Then Harry Kane, the captain, undoubtedly didn't perform to the level that he should have done, and it seems like he played injured, which again is arrogant and quite selfish. Phil Foden, I just don't see it. Look, if it happened, and I'm not telling Jude Bellingham what to think about a situation. If he believes that he was scapegoated, I can't tell him if he was or not. I just don't really see it that way, because when I think about the players that did well for England, he would be one of the first names I would mention. Saka, I thought, was excellent for us throughout the tournament.
Yeah, look,
Mark Gahey.
I don't disagree with your assessment, your diagnosis of the things that went wrong in the Euros. I'm talking about Jude Bellingham, and I really believe, I look at him speak and I think, you know what? I've got nothing to argue. I agree with what you're saying. And I do think that, to an extent, whether you call it scapegoating or not, he was overly criticised. And look, I cannot wait to see him play tonight. I saw him play in the flesh for the first time against Ireland, and just the swagger of the man, for me, he's got to be the next England captain.
Bellingham? Yeah, I think that is almost definitely a shoo-in, isn't it?
So do you buy into this stuff, just before we break, do you buy into this narrative that players don't like Jude Bellingham?
That I don't know. I mean, that was the word on the street, wasn't it? That there was disharmony in the camp. But if a journalist did break that story, it wouldn't have been totally made up. There must have been some sort of mileage to.
Well,
there's got to be some oxygen in there.
You can say there's no smoke without fire, but sources, I can tell you, in the journalistic industry aren't necessarily as reliable as we always think. But look, Jude Bellingham is set to play tonight. However, for the defending champions, they are without Vinicius Junior. The Brazilian winger is one of a number of high-profile injuries at Real Madrid.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app, and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.